Welcome to the DBT Cloud, AutomateDV, and DataVault webinar. We'll talk about building your data warehouse with scale, agility, and reliability. So on this slide, which you should see here, we have the two presenters. We have myself. My name is Sean McIntyre. I'm a solutions architect here at DBT Labs. I'm based in Vienna, Austria, and I've been helping people with DBT for the last 3 years across Europe and North America, helping them get started with DBT and scale DBT at their companies. So pleased to meet you. And I'm joined here by Alex from DataVault.
Hello, thanks, Sean. My name's Alex Higgs. I am a senior data engineer here at DataVault, and I'm also product owner of AutomateDV, which you'll get a chance to look at today. All
right, looking forward to that, Alex. So here's what we're going to be covering over the next 60 minutes. It is a packed agenda, so we will be using every second. We're going to talk with about 10 minutes of slides to show you what DBT Cloud is, in case you've never heard of it, and what DataVault is, in case you never heard of that either, and talk about why these two work together so well. Alex will take over and talk about DataVault data modeling and using AutomateDV with DBT in order to implement it. And then we're going to be spending a lot of time in this webinar going through a demo of using DBT Cloud with AutomateDV. And then we'll also wrap up by taking some of your questions and helping you get started with next steps with DBT Cloud and AutomateDV. All right, so here we go. So what is this DBT thing? Well, if you've never heard of it before, DBT is a very popular data transformation tool, and it's the new standard for data transformations. There's been a lot of people talking about it at conferences, on blog posts, everywhere on the internet and in the data community. And that's because there's a lot of users and a lot of happy users of this good tool. There's over 30,000 companies with over 4,000 customers of our cloud service, and over 100,000 community members in our Slack and on our forums. I was an early DBT community member, and I've learned a lot in my data career just by being part of it. But not only from the community, but also from other of our big tech partners, such as Snowflake and Databricks, have both recognized us as important parts of their ecosystems as well. So what does DBT aim to do? Well, DBT helps companies with their raw data sources, whether they have 10 sources, 20 sources, 50, or over 100 of CRMs and ERPs and Salesforce and NetSuite, and getting that data, once it's been loaded into a cloud data platform like Snowflake or Databricks, DBT helps get to insights of whether the insights are taken from the dashboards or machine learning or AI applications, or pushed out back to other platforms. DBT is how you get from that raw data that's messy and unconformed into nice conformed data sets for consistency across these applications in order to help your business with your goals of increasing revenue or meeting your project deadlines or being efficient across the board. And DBT does that with a number of different features: discovering, aligning, building, deploying, and doing it in a governed, secure, and scalable fashion. I hope that's what you'll come with today, is how to get DBT to get that raw data into your data vault, which then can be used in these applications. DBT Cloud offers a lot of solutions on top of DBT Core. So if you're already familiar with DBT and DBT Core, you know that DBT is great at transformations, at testing and deploying your code into your database. I wanted to highlight a few features of DBT Cloud, and we'll be showing you them today, that help build Data Vault specifically. The first is the command line interface with the DBT Cloud, as well as the built-in IDE to help developers of your Data Vault get started with building the Data Vault in a really well-governed fashion, but also in a very fast way. Then the DBT Explorer helps you and helps organizations understand what Data Vault assets have been created with DBT so that users of the Data Vault can discover for themselves what hubs, links, satellites, and so on are available as they build out their own data marts on top of that Data Vault and their own aggregated reports in order to power the applications that they're building. And last but not least, the observability aspect of DBT, which we'll get into also in our demo, to show you how to add in data quality checks as part of the data build pipeline of your Data Vault, and to be alerted on when there's issues building that Data Vault so you can address them and get them going. DBT, one thing I want to highlight is DBT will push code to your database and to your data platform. Snowflake, Databricks, BigQuery, Redshift, Starburst, and Fabric are some of the platforms that are supported. And DBT works by sending SQL code and Python code to those platforms in order to transform that data within the platform itself, so the data stays within the platform. And really, when teams use DBT, they often have this great relationship between the developers and the consumers of data. If you've worked in data for 10 or more years, you've probably experienced a lot of waterfall processes of throwing tasks onto queues and waiting for them to be done by the data engineers and having results kind of trickle in slowly. DBT Cloud really allows for an agile process so that data developers are quickly delivering new features. Consumers are being able to understand what features are being produced with high quality tested data, and also for them be able to read for themselves the transformations and understand for themselves what the data developers are doing. And ultimately that builds a lot of trust in the process and building these analytics, which is a really big important part of being an effective data team in any organization. And on top of that, with DBT's approach of developing data, there's ways to optimize your data pipelines easily so that you can do it quickly and then find bottlenecks and transformations that cost a lot of money and then optimize them over time so that you have an efficient and scalable data platform. Ultimately, what Alex and I are hoping you come away with from today's talk about Data Vault and DBT Cloud is that when you use these two platforms together, or the Data Vault methodology with DBT Cloud, ultimately you build trust in data and data teams across your organization so that that data is used and there's no shadow IT that's building their own processes outside of the data team. That is done faster. And then it also is done at a cheaper way than other tools. So that's the introduction to DBT Cloud and Data Vault. But let's go into why would you go ahead and use this pattern together? And let's talk about some other approaches. I've seen a lot of Data Vaults being built using stored procedures. And ultimately, I also have seen a lot of people who are generally confused and unhappy about the data that they're consuming from that Data Vault. And why is that? Because it's hard to understand how the data flows from the beginnings of the data as it's being loaded into the data warehouse through all of these different scripts, whether they have 5 or 10 or 20 different steps, ultimately into these dashboards. It's just hard to maintain and hard to reason and understand how the data flows through the different database objects. Meanwhile, there's other approaches I've seen of using Data Vaults with point and click tools and drag and drop tools. And while that starts out well at first, often as the years go by of building these large scale data platforms, it becomes confusing as to how, and again, to reason how the end results of the Data Vault come to be, because developers will typically tack on different transformations and additional columns with different nodes in the graphs in order to achieve the result. And that becomes hard to maintain, and it really slows down over the years. So that's why we're suggesting here DBT, because DBT gives you a lot of insight into how the data flows from the different source systems through all the different transformations, which Alex will show you in his next demo, of building all of those data vault objects, the tables and the views, in order to build eventually the marts that are then consumed by the dashboards. And of course, you have that happy analyst who can see for themselves and know how the data is being transformed, where it's coming from, and whether it's passing the tests or whether the tests are broken, so they know the data quality of the data that they're consuming. So this really summarizes it for you, and why I think, and why we think dbt Cloud and Datavault is a really great combination. As I showed you in the previous slide, you get that lineage, and it flows through the staging area, the raw data vault, the business vault, into the marts. So you really can have an end-to-end understanding of the data from its raw form into its nice conformed marts for use in those AI, ML, and BI applications. And this process, you can build it and you can scale it, because Alex will show you AutomateDV and how all of the basic features of Datavault are already implemented for you when you get started with this approach. You can build your hubs, links, and satellites, but you can also do point-in-time tables and have ghost records, and you can customize your hashing algorithms to match your organization's needs. And this scales. We have experience with our clients of using this approach to large scales. Not only can you do it, but you can do it faster. And that's because of that data lineage, the data ops automation that comes with dbt Cloud, so you can execute your SQL statements after your data has been built, such as your grant statements or your data masking that you need to have done. But I think really the reason why it's faster is because dbt Cloud makes it very easy to have multiple environments and build multiple data vaults as your process requires. So you can have a data vault inside of your production, but also easily set one up for a developer so they can have a copy of it and then make changes before pushing out their code and their changes to production. You can also have test and UAT, and it becomes pretty easy with dbt Cloud in order to set different environments up and have different purposes. And last but not least, Datavault has a lot of standards. dbt Cloud helps enforce those standards. Data quality checks, just on make sure that the testing is being done correctly and you have your foreign keys checked properly, but also to make sure that the transformations and the tables are meeting certain naming requirements, and make sure that the columns meet different naming requirements that your organization has, so that people really understand what's being built and enforce that as the code's being checked into the production branch. And that's being done with change management with Git, which also allows for auditability of what is being built, and rollbacks too. All right, I will leave you here with this. We have worked with McDonald's Nordics in order to deploy this solution out, dbt Cloud and AutomateDV. And the challenge that this organization is facing was they have different countries. They have the 4 countries, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and Finland, each of which have their own systems. And as you can imagine, and Datavault is really appropriate here in order to conform those business ideas into a data vault, and then to build reporting off of that data vault. And they've done it to the scale of over 1 billion euros in transactions, and across those 4 markets. So I think this is a great application of this. And one of the great outcomes was they reported that their velocity increased by adopting this technique. All right, I'm going to pass it over to you, Alex.
Thank you so much, Sean. Am I loud and clear?
You are.
Excellent. All right, so I will take over. Thank you. Let me share. Okay, so if you hadn't already understood by now, the AutomateDV is kind of the perfect harmony, in my opinion, of what happens when you combine Datavault and dbt. To understand, first, I'm going to explain a bit about what Datavault is, just for those of you who may be unsure, haven't seen it before. And to do that, I'm going to go back to kind of the why DataVault was created, and the whole, what's the point? So the first thing to understand is DataVault very much is not just a modeling approach. It's a methodology. It's got some governance stuff in there. It's got some project delivery stuff in there. It is designed as an agile data warehousing approach, but with the main purpose of it being a focus on the business needs, what the business want, and providing a business view of the data, not just a technical one. So in order to achieve that, the creators essentially, and I need to clarify at this point, whilst we are called DataVault, whilst the company I'm from is called DataVault, we didn't create it. We are experts in the DataVault method, so we just named ourselves after it. It was created by someone called Dan Lindstedt in around sort of the early 2000s. But it was created with the philosophy of focusing on the business needs. And if you think about it, at a very high level, there's kind of three main things the business are interested in. And that's business objects or business entities, and essentially how to identify things in the business. So a customer is a thing, an order is a thing, for example. Interactions between those business objects or entities. So, for example, a customer makes an order, a customer can have many orders, and the state of those interactions and between objects and entities, and the entities themselves at any given point in time. And those three things at a high level is what the business is looking for. So someone who's potentially non-technical, and that's what they want to see when they go to their data. They want to see, okay, the questions they want to answer is, okay, how many orders did a customer make? That's information about two entities, for example. Okay, and these three requirements can be essentially implemented using three standard structures, which form the building blocks of the DataVault modeling approach. And those of you, anyone who's done a quick Google on DataVault will have come up with something called hubs, something called links, something called satellites. And that's what I'm going to explain now. So these three things can be implemented with hubs, links, and satellites. So a hub is a list of the unique business keys. So that's the business objects, how to identify them. Link is essentially your list of unique relationships between those keys or business entities. And your satellites are essentially the changes and history tied to those relationships and those entities over time. So a satellite can be attached to a link, and that describes the changes to relationships over time. And a satellite can also be tied to a link, to a hub, sorry, and that will be able to describe the changes to the entities over time. The important thing to remember here, and I'll get onto this in a second, is it's all built to be insert only. So it's audit by design. We never delete anything. We only ever insert. And that means we, at any point in time, will be able to know what we knew and when, essentially. Because they are denormalized, when I show you some of the models in a second, you'll say, oh, well, that just looks like 3NF, and more or less it essentially is. But the point is that these are templated, standardized structures. And because they are templated and standardized, that leads us to automation. It enables us to very quickly deploy these structures. So again, a focus on the fact they're integrated on business keys and form a data model of the core business concepts of your business. So it's almost like it's a model of the business processes rather than a model of the data specifically. Okay, so the way that we like to describe it is, imagine a washing line, and you've got your hubs and links on this washing line. And we call this the spine, because kind of the backbone of the whole data model. And if you want to, so remembering hubs are your entities and links are the relationships between those entities. You can't go from hub to hub. If you want to get from a hub to another hub, you have to go via a link. Same as you can't go from a link to a link to get to find another relationship related to your hub. You would have to go to the hub and then to the link again. So this forms our backbone. And then for satellites, for example, that's our description. That's our actual data about these things, about these entities. So what we would do is, in the washing line analogy, is we'd hang these on the relevant the relevant entity or relevant relationship that we're trying to describe. Excuse me. And what we usually do is for a given satellite, we either create a satellite per source or a satellite for different cadences. So if we have very regularly refreshing data, we might have a satellite for that, or we might have a satellite for data that's less regularly refreshing. And this, essentially, these three core structures provide the magic of how we integrate disparate data sources and how we can rapidly iterate and integrate. Because if we want to add new data sources, all we have to do is add different satellites. Because they all integrate around the business keys, as long as you've got those business keys in your sources, you can integrate all around the same keys. So you might have customer IDs, for example. They might have different formats in different systems, but they are all ways of identifying a customer. And therefore, we have a customer hub, and we can add descriptive information about that customer from different sources and keep building it up as much as we need to. It means also this handles things like having different attributes and different data from different sources. No two sources may give you the same information. So this allows you to integrate all of that together, essentially. So in summary, why Datavault? Well, it provides a pattern. It provides a series of structures on what columns should be in these structures, how to load those structures, and how to query those structures. Now, there is some of it's non-trivial, and I would never recommend writing the SQL yourself. But that's why we automate. It's built for automation. It was never intended to be for any of this to be manually written. But out of that, you get a lot of benefit and a lot of kind of passive integration is the aim here. So that means we can generate the hubs, links, and satellites, and that's what AutomateDV does using the power of DBT. So introducing AutomateDV, essentially what AutomateDV does is, because it's a DBT package, publicly available, all free, all that good stuff, it means that we got all the nice features of DBT, and we, not to dumb it down, but we basically just provide the Datavault bits. So we provide a template for hubs, template for satellites, template for links, and so on and so forth. There are other structures available, just those are the core three. And your workflow as a developer then becomes based on a data model that would have been developed with your data modelers and the business. You can then take that data model, the metadata of that data model is just your column names. You provide those to our templates, you run DBT, and out pops your Datavault structures, essentially. So this is what a hub would look like in DBT. So you can see the macro call at the bottom, which is essentially the template that you're providing the parameters to, as it's a macro parameterized template. At the top, we've got our metadata. So in this case, it's where the data is coming from, so the source model. And then for our hub, your primary key, the natural key, the load date time, and the record source. Every single table in Datavault has a record source and a load date time, and that's part of where the audit comes from. It means for every single record, you know when it was loaded and where it came from. And there's lots you can do with that. And that's what it would look like in an entity relationship diagram there. And this is an example of how a hub might look in the DBT documentation. Pretty standard, straightforward stuff. Okay, so now over to the demo, see it in action. Let me just switch over. Okay, great. So this is the DBT Cloud interface. And for those of you who haven't seen it before, these are kind of all the standard folders. You get models and macros. And most of the time as a developer, you'll be living in the models folder. This is essentially where you define your SQL. In this case, this is where we define our raw vault. And what we call our raw vault, which is our hub, links, and satellites, and other structures. We stage the data, and this means enhancing the data with any hash columns or what we call derived columns, which is like column aliases and things like that. So I'll talk you through these folders. So first we'll have a look at some hubs. So let's go to hub customer, and you'll see this is identical to the example I showed you in the slide. Excuse me, sorry, it's very zoomed in, there you go. And you'll see if we go to another hub, the only thing that changes here is some of the metadata, but everything else is exactly the same. Hub nation is exactly the same. Actually, just realized, sorry, before we go any further, this is a entity relationship diagram. It's got, it's not complete, but it's a basic entity relationship diagram describing the data set we're looking at here, which is the TPCH data set built into Snowflake. And you can see that this, so blue is hubs, red is links, yellow is satellites. I can talk about this more later if we have time at the end. But essentially this, as you can see, this allows you to kind of relate all the entities together. So you can say, okay, a hub and a customer is related like this. If you want to know the nation for a customer, you can just go over here, do the hops between these and get to the nation, the suppliers, all that kind of stuff. And then the satellites hold the actual kind of concrete information you can see here. So that's kind of a basic overview before we go further. Let me just hop back. So the idea here is, the point I'm trying to make here is that the only thing that changes is the metadata. You haven't had to completely change the SQL, you're just changing the parameters. Let's have a look at a link very quickly. So you can see, again, very similar. The link just has the primary keys at the hub. And let's go over to a satellite, and we can see that it's a little bit more complicated just because satellites, you know, they have all the change history, tracking and everything. So there's a few more parameters in here, but otherwise you've just changed what parameters you provide and call the same template. Now at this point, it's really important to understand that whilst a link, for example, relates two hubs together, there's no enforced integrity there. So you don't have to wait for all your hubs to load before your link. Same as you don't have to wait your hubs to load for your satellite, and so on and so forth. And actually, Datavault is optimized for load and parallel loading. And the great thing about DBT is we can run multiple threads. So you can configure DBT to say run 10 threads, and that's running 10 models or SQL tables in one go. And it is really nicely matched up to the way Datavault works. That's one of the things that we really liked when we started developing AutomateDV back in 2019. Okay, so that's hubs and satellites. Let me just show you very quickly the lineage here. Oops, sorry. There you go. So you can see here, if I just show you the whole graph, that we have everything kind of leading into each other. Important just to notice as well that although we've joined quite a lot together to get the raw data, that wouldn't typically happen in a real data vault. You don't integrate in the raw data. You use the raw vault and your hubs and satellites to integrate. Just because this is a very simple data set, we've just had to do it that way. So don't do this at home, basically. But the idea is that you can see that your hubs and satellites are all loading mostly from one staging area, one like this, and so on and so forth. And you can see in staging, if I go back to staging very quickly, that it's very easy to define your hash keys and derived keys and things like that. So to hash a key, to hash a column, all I have to say is this is the column I want to hash, so customer key, and please hash it and call it customer PK. So if let me just compile that and I'll show you. You wouldn't want to be doing this manually, let's put it that way. Oh. Sorry, I had it highlighted. So you can see that what actually gets generated is, so derived keys are basically aliases and things. In AutomateDV, we have this exclamation mark symbol that essentially allows you to define constants. So this renders like this in the SQL. And then we've got all of our hashes. So that's our customer PK, that one I showed you. And then we've got all of these down here, and this is all generated using a standard hashing approach. And as Sean mentioned earlier, you can configure this, which is very nice. You can do it for your organization purposes. And this basically ensures there's consistent hashes. And the reason we hash in Datavault is for speeding up the joins and creating consistent integration points, essentially. Now, without further ado, I will run that and hop over to Snowflake. Let me just refresh that. Okay, so there's nothing there at the moment. It's just going to run load everything, you can see that it's running everything in parallel. So this hub, this link, it's all running at the same time. If I keep refreshing in here, you'll see it all gradually coming in. Refresh, there's more, there's more. Let's have a look at one of the hubs whilst it's loading. So you can see that out pops your hub, customer PK, which is the hash. You've got the customer key, the load date here, which is a direct implementation of this customer hub here. Slightly different naming, but it's the same thing essentially. And you can see that for every single record, we've got the load date and the record source. You know, this came from the orders table in TPCH. Let's refresh again. There you go. We've got a link. We've got all of our links and our satellites now. So you can see the link there relating all of the different keys. So one of the interesting ones is, for example, customer order. You can see this customer, this order are related, and so on and so forth. Obviously, it doesn't mean much at this point because it's all hashes, but it's essentially like a big lookup table. And you get to your satellites, and you can see that this is all the information about orders, for example, and you can see all the status and the changes to that over time. And yeah, so that ran 38 seconds, 31 models. Just for those interested in numbers, this is only like 100,000 records or something, and running on an extra small warehouse in Snowflake. So we've run this with billions of records with much larger scales, and it scales very well. Datavault is designed for big data, and we've made sure that we stick to the standards, and the standards are there to keep it performant, essentially. So that's it for the demo for now. We can always come back to that later if anyone has any questions. Sorry for the infinite view there. Okay. And I will now hand over to Sean, who has a little bit more to show you on the demo, which I'm quite excited by, actually.
Thanks, Alex. It was great to see how you can use AutomateDV in order to build out these hubs, links, and satellites. I hope everyone got a good understanding of the process there of using the templated approach. It makes it very easy to manage your metadata in order to build out these very standardized tables in your data vault. I see a lot of questions coming in, which is great. And we're going to come back to those questions at the end. But before we do, I'm going to do a little bit more demoing because basically, as we know, building out a data platform and a data warehouse is a multiplayer game. It's not typically done by a single person, especially at scale. And so what I'll do is I'll continue on Alex's demo, and I will build out an additional couple of marts after the data vault using dbt Cloud. And that way you can really understand how to build your data vault, as well as enable your users to build out their own data vault marts and data sets from that. So here we go. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Pardon me. Sorry, one sec. Here we go. All right. So what we'll go through is basically the life cycle of developing with dbt Cloud, and whether you're building out the data vault, as Alex showed you, or building out SQL transformations after the data vault. And we're going to start with the development and how to get started with that. And then we'll go into a bit of testing and data quality checks on your data vault and other models. Then deploying and how to run this on a schedule. And then we'll talk about monitoring and discover. So in this first little demonstration, I'll show you how to, a lot of what Alex has already shown, but I'll show you how to build a mart from the data vault. I'm going to click the preview button so you can see how dbt Cloud can show you the data inside of your data warehouse. And then I'm going to go ahead and build the data set as well. So here we go. So back inside of DBT Cloud, I have the same data, project that Alex has been working on. It has the raw stage, the raw vault, and the same hubs, links, and satellites. And so you can imagine me being his teammate and working on a separate task. And inside of my project, I have my own branch that I'm going to develop my own marts inside of. And inside of there, we have the DIM customers. And this is what I've built off of Alex's code already. And we see here that it is a SQL-based transformation. So it looks quite different from the templated approach. But here we are using a SQL select statement in order to specify what we want the DIM customers to look at. And specifically what we're doing is we're getting the latest satellite order customer, nation, and region with this qualify rank to get the latest record in those satellites, and then joining them together via the hub and flattening it out in order to build our DIM customer. And you can imagine that this is really useful in an application like a dashboard or report, and also to keep consistent with your data science and AI applications that want to use the same data as the reporting systems. Okay, so what can I do with this? And you see that it's just a basic select statement. Well, the first thing I can do is I can click the preview button. And the preview button, since it's a single select statement, I can just get a good sense as I'm developing what the data will look like before I build it and actually persist it as a data set inside of Snowflake. So I see here that there's the records. This one, its customer is in the automobile segment and has this account balance. And you could imagine using that in a dashboard. And what else can I show you here? So the compiled code, where we see that I was talking about environments earlier. I'm in my development environment. And so that's why we see a dbt s McIntyre, which is my name, prefixed to the schema name. And so I've set this up so that I am building my data sets in a schema that's dedicated to me, my development environment. And Alex has his own development environment. And so that way, when I go ahead and click the build button, and it creates this table, it'll create it inside of my own schema, and that won't overwrite production, or it won't overwrite testing, or it won't overwrite Alex's own development environment. I've set it up to fail. That is a known thing, and I will come back to that later in the demo. And last but not least, let's look at the lineage so we can see just how DIM customers was built. And similarly to what Alex showed in his demo, we can see that DIM customers was built from these satellites and hubs through these staging tables, and ultimately from these source systems and source tables. And that's something that you get for free with DBT, just based upon using these ref statements, which allow DBT to understand how the data is being built and what order the data sets should be built. Good. So from that, I hope you understand the development aspect of DBT Cloud and DBT generally. It's very, whether you're doing the data vault or whether you are doing these SQL transformations, it gives this very readable and understandable way to define these transformations and chain them together in a way that DBT understands, and also a data engineer understands, or a data analyst, someone who may not be building these data sets themselves, but maybe be consuming them. And they can really, because presumably they would know SQL as well, they can come in and they can look at the code and understand it. And that ultimately makes it more collaborative and has a more trusting approach to building data. Good. So I'm going to show you another demo, and this will go into the testing integration. And this is about data quality. So when I was using DBT at my last job, one of the worst situations that I would come across would be when someone went into Slack and messaged me, "Hey, Sean, the data doesn't look right. It doesn't match my expectations." It doesn't match what our source system says. That's the worst scenario to have. And so testing in DBT really helps you prevent those scenarios and really ensure data quality at every step of the process, from beginning of development through integration of code, and then lastly into running and tests in production to ensure that it meets our data quality checks. So in this demo, what I'll do is I'll go back into DBT Cloud, and I'll show you how to define tests. They're really easy to define, and I'm going to go ahead and run those tests as well, so we can catch them. And I've set it up to fail. So we have a testing failure. I'm going to fix it for you, and then I'm going to integrate that code into the production branch. So here we go. Back into DBT Cloud, not only do we have these SQL files, the models and the marts and the data vaults, we also have these YAML files, these models.yaml. And YAML is a configuration language we use in DBT regularly. We use it for a couple of main reasons. The first is for documentation. And so we can, as data developers, describe what our different tables we're producing in our database are right in the code. And these can be stored as comments in the database. And you can also add these on to your hubs, links, and satellites in YAML files inside of the data vault folders. Then we can also describe the columns. And why we want to do that is, again, for documentation, but also for tests. So we can run some tests. This customer key, we're saying it's a primary key. Let's confirm that, as a lot of these columnar-based cloud data warehouses don't enforce it. So we'll check for it, and we'll confirm that indeed they are primary keys in order to prevent fan-out, in order to ensure that our data quality is right, our numbers are right. We also have this accepted values test, which will fail if there's any value outside of these three. And there's many more. There's hundreds of more tests that you can add, including standard deviation checks for anomaly detection, and so on. So how do we run these? Well, I can go down here, execute DBT test, and this will find all of the tests in the project and execute them all. They'll compile down to SQL statements and execute on the database. And then basically they're checking for bad records. And of course, as I said, we've set this up to fail. That's that test failure that we have here. And the accepted values one failed. So let's go ahead and take a look at why that failed. And we can do some data exploration straight inside of DBT Cloud here. Select customer market segment and count from ref dim customers. I'm using the special syntax in DBT, this curly brace, because I wanted to resolve for me the environment I'm in, because I'm lazy. I forget which actual database and schema I'm in, so I can let DBT figure that out for me. Group by 1, order by 2 descending. So this is plain old SQL, right? This is the database SQL dialect, and anything that works on your database works here, and then just a little bit of Jinja on top. And so we see here there's automobile, machinery, furniture, and household. And it's automobile that's missing. It's not in that list of accepted values, but of course, you know, in our fictitious business that Alex and I work in, we do work with automobile customers. So let's go ahead and add it in. And as a good developer, I'm going to retest it. I can just do a DBT test and then models dim customers. So I'm just not running the whole test suite. I'm running just the ones related to dim customers. And once I've confirmed that it works well, I will go ahead and commit this and merge it into production. So let's do the commit and sync. And then say fix the broken test. And this runs the proper git command on the back end. And this is really helpful, especially for users who are not comfortable with Git. It's a really nice and simple interface to open up pull requests inside this IDE. And then we rely on the Git provider. So here at DBT Labs and also Alex over at DataVault, we use GitHub. It also works with GitLab and Azure DevOps and Bitbucket, and so on. But I've already opened up a pull request, and I've filled in the pull request to describe what I've done, as well as go through a checklist that my pull request represents one logical piece of work. It follows the style guide. And really, this provides a little bit of social governance so our colleagues can, like such as Alex over here, can review my pull request and look at what I've done. He understands what I've done. He can look at the code changes and then give his approval before I'm allowed to merge this code into production. And while I was talking, we had a automated dbt Cloud continuous integration check run, which basically ran the tests for me in my special schema and development branch, and gave me an automated approval to check data quality as it goes. And you notice I can't merge this until Alex were to approve it. Well, I can because I'm admin, but typically you can govern and control how your users build your data vault. Basically, that's what I'm trying to say here, is that this allows you to provide this capability to your team, but to also enable a nice governance practice to ensure that best practices are being followed and data quality is high before you merge your data vault code to production. And so you have a good data vault in production. Great. So that is about testing and integration. And hopefully that gives you a better understanding of a day in the life of a developer using dbt Cloud to build data vaults and data marts after that. Because everything I've shown you is also applicable to what Alex did, whether you're building a template or whether you're building a SQL model. The last demo I'm going to do is just a quick deployment demo to show you the built-in job scheduling capabilities of dbt Cloud. And so I'm going to open up a job that's been running on a daily basis, and then I'm going to show you the logs and how it was set up. That way you can understand not only how you can develop your code, but how you can run it in production to deliver the data at the time you need. Good. So back into dbt Cloud, we've been in the develop section. We'll go to the deploy section now. And here we see the jobs, and I'm an administrator on my account. So I have the ability to look at the jobs and edit the jobs. There's a role-based access control element to dbt Cloud. So not everyone can do this, just people who are authorized. We see a CI job. That's the job that was running when I opened up my pull request. But this is the daily job that's building the data set from yesterday. And we get a lot of job-like information, right? The number of errors and success rates and how long it took. That information's all here. We also see previous runs, and we can click into them to see what happened in those runs and understand where we need to make changes. So let's look at the settings, and really dbt Cloud jobs are quite simple but powerful because they build out your whole data vault in your database. But this dbt build will build that whole thing. You can do something like, if you just want to build the data vault layer, maybe you've tagged all your models in the data vault as like the raw vault layer. That's possible. And then after you do that, you can do a dbt build select tag marts. And if it fails building the raw vault, then it will stop. It'll send an email or a Slack notification or a Microsoft Teams notification to your team, and it won't build the marts at all. So that way, it's basically, if this works, then it goes on to the next step. It's a serial job scheduler. Then, last but not least, this is running on a schedule, a very simple cron-based approach. But if you have an orchestrator, and I saw someone in the chat was asking about this, you can integrate with an API trigger. And popular ones that we see are Airflow and Azure Data Factory, very common to have a dbt Cloud job operator sitting in those tools to have dbt Cloud triggered at the time you want, right? After you've loaded the data, you trigger your dbt Cloud job to build your data vault and your marts, and then maybe afterwards you refresh a dashboard in Power BI or so on. And really, that's a good aspect of dbt Cloud, because really this is the tool that enables the people responsible for data transformations to be fully capable to do that themselves. They can develop their code, they can test it out in their development, they can open up pull requests, they can have it run in production, they can discover errors by clicking into the logs and seeing what happened, finding the errors over here, and then seeing the snowflake logs at the bottom, going back into develop, fixing it, opening up a pull request, and rerunning the job. So really, it's this tool that enables the whole life cycle of a data transformation developer. On top of that, I also wanted to just mention here, dbt Cloud keeps a track of the model timing. So you can see where bottlenecks exist and how long it took for each step of the way. And that's really great for cost optimization. So you can identify which of the transformations are taking the most time on your database and then optimize appropriately, say with incremental loads and high watermark checks rather than doing a full rebuild, which is very possible. Okay, wrapping this up. I talked about the deployment part, and I hope you can see that dbt Cloud makes it very easy to deploy dbt code in the continuous integration, as well as on a schedule or integrated with your orchestrator. And it provides logging and alerting with emails and those logs that I showed you for your developers to see what went wrong and how to fix it. And last but not least is the Discover feature, which I'll just show you in an upcoming slide. Basically, a way to uncover what dbt assets are available in your organization. So coming to two more features, wanted to just briefly mention. One is dbt mesh. A lot of organizations are interested in data mesh approaches. Last year, we released a suite of features that allow for multiple dbt projects to work together using a cross-project ref. That way, you could imagine there's a project in your organization that's dedicated to building your data vault, or maybe the raw data vault part. And then you can have other teams that perhaps are more close to the business who are consuming those data vault assets, or maybe the DIMs and facts afterwards, to produce their own aggregated resources. And having a way for these teams to collaborate with their own projects, but in a governed fashion. So that enables data mesh in an organization. Also is the dbt Explorer. I briefly mentioned it, but you can think of it as a lightweight data catalog that has all of the dbt assets within your organization. So you can discover what tables have already been built. And rather than building them from scratch in your own project, you can reuse them from someone else. And that eliminates data silos and helps with moving faster and delivering new data projects. So we're going to wrap up now, and I think we'll have time for a couple of questions. I think I've looked at some of them, so I might pick them. And Alex, I'll have you come up on stage in a few minutes. But I hope what you came away with this webinar is that the approach of AutomateDV and dbt Cloud helps you build trust in your data and data teams using the governed process of dbt Cloud with the templated approach of AutomateDV to build out your data vault. I hope you have also learned that this approach helps you ship your data products faster, your data vault faster, because you see the lineage and you have different development environments. It's very easy to pick up a new ticket and to get going. And that's what McDonald's Nordics reported earlier in our slides. And last but not least, this whole way you can understand what's being built inside of your database from the dbt Cloud insights and Explorer, and you can identify bottlenecks and really manage your cloud spend so that you can build this in a scalable fashion. I wanted to highlight here Data Vault, which is where Alex works, and dbt Labs, which is where I work, are collaborating together with the new service offerings. We have 2 offerings. One, these will help you basically get you started and help you deliver a data vault with dbt Cloud faster and in a more risk-free way. So the first one is a rapid onboarding, which is a way to, when you get started with this approach, to work with our team of experts to guide you towards being successful over about the course of 6 weeks. Then there's also a larger package that we offer where it includes that rapid onboarding, but then also works with you for an additional 6 weeks to help you move away from your existing data vault into the data vault approach. And the data vault team are very skilled at this. They do this every day, and they can provide a lot of expertise and get you going a lot faster with that. And the dbt Cloud team can also help you too. So thanks for joining. We have time for a couple questions. Here's our links to also help you get started. These can be found in Goldcast in the Docs tab. So you see on the top right of Goldcast, there's the chat, the Docs, the QA. The Docs tab has links for all of these to get started with a trial, to get started with AutomateDV, or to book a demo with one of our dbt Cloud people. And we'll also work with AutomateDV and bring them in so you can also learn from them directly how they can help your organization. And please give us feedback on the session today. So with Alex, I get you back on stage. We had a couple of really good questions. Let me see here.
There's a bit of a mix. I saw a couple of Datavault, a couple of dbt.
Yeah. Let me see here. I saw one that I really loved. It was this one. Just because I think this is such a like how to get started question from Luis Pareto. So I'm going to ignore the spelling mistakes. Any GitHub repo or sample data vault integration and setup. Alex, I know you have this. So would you be able maybe just tell us a little bit?
Yeah, so actually the demo that I showed you today is available publicly. It's called AutomateDV demo. We can link it. And can we provide that afterwards?
Yeah, I think we can.
Okay,
yeah, and you maybe we'll put in the chat right after we answer another question or two.
Yeah, so it's publicly available and you can try it out for yourself and mess around with AutomateDV, dbt Cloud. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Luis, for that. Elena has a good question here. Elena asks, we saw links, hub satellites. Are other data vault objects automatically generated from that?
Good question. Yeah, so they're not automatically generated. You still have to create the models and provide the template, provide the metadata. However, we do provide the templates for pits, bridges, effectivity satellites, a bunch of other ones. As well, yeah, so not just hubs, links, and satellites.
That's right, and the AutomateDV package is very well documented. So in that Docs tab, there's that Get Started with AutomateDV, and you'll navigate to the AutomateDV dbt package. And Alex and the team have really made it easy for you to understand all the different data vault capabilities that it offers and how to use them. So I really like their package, and you'll be able to see that on their website. The last one I want to share with you, Alex, you and I were talking about this recently, is from Roxana Maria. And Roxana Maria asks, how would you automate the generation of hubs, links, and satellites if the request would be to create 1,000 objects within a short amount of time? The time wouldn't allow you to write the SQL models manually.
It's a good question. Yeah, so I mean, the great thing about dbt is it's all the actual stuff that's version controlled is all textual, right? It's SQL files, YAML files, Markdown files, and that ultimately can all be generated. We are currently developing essentially a Python wrapper CLI for AutomateDV that will be able to do more of this generation. Yeah, which is quite exciting.
Yeah, and I think this is the real reason why you want to continue talking with Alex and the Data Vault team, because they they've generated tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of SQL models in AutomateDV at this point. So they know that problem very well. And they have lots of tricks that you can only really learn about when you talk to them. So that's what I wanted to say there. But that's all the time we have. We're about a minute over. Thanks, everyone, for your attention and your great questions. I hope you got a lot out of this. And please be in touch by reaching out to us. Have a great day.
Thank you so much, everyone.